Hi. Well, welcome. I'm Robert Dejarek from Temple University, Japan. Very happy to see you here for this seminar. I'm extremely grateful to Bill to have taken the time from an extremely busy schedule accompanying science students who are on their yearly tour of Japan and also holding meetings. Bill is known as one of the leading experts on the Japanese media. He is, many friends tell me, the most impressive linguist from the Foreign Service. And he has studied the Futenma and the Okinawa issue for a very long time, taking advantage of his knowledge of the Japanese press, the Japanese media, to give us a look at the issue as it's seen from Japan, as well as taking advantage of experience in the U.S. Foreign Service to give us an American perspective on it. So you came to hear him, not me. So the only things I'll say is, if you are not on our general email list, give me your business card, or we have a box out there, I think. You can also make a contribution to our programs. There's a donation box. It's not a voting box. It's not for ballots. It's for cash. And also, if you have a mobile phone, maybe put it on a silent, vibrate, or turn it off. And Bill will speak for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have our usual Q&A session. And for those of you who want to watch the program again, we may put it at one point on our website. And yeah, we already have a lot of events on our website as well as the site. So thank you. Thank you, Robert. Thank you. Thank you.
I first have to apologize for wearing sunglasses. I'm not trying to be cool. I just had a car accident experience over the weekend, and my right eye looks pretty bad, so I didn't want to scare you out of the room. At any rate, tonight I will try to give you my impressions of an issue that I've had many, many years of personal experience, and hopefully in the questions and answers you can find out what I don't know about the issue. But to me, the Futenma issue, which I've indicated is a crack in our alliance, perhaps, is one of the most difficult and most pending issues that the U.S.-Japan has faced since the beginning of the alliance. In fact, I served in the embassy running the press translation unit from 1993 until 2009, when I retired. And most of those years, from 1995, the Futenma relocation issue has been on the books. And it's still not resolved. It's still there. It still seems to be, there's a great American movie called Groundhog Day, where Bill Murray wakes up every morning and goes through the same day all over again. I think with this issue, sadly, it's become a similar thing where it just never seems to be resolved. What I'll try to do this evening is to do two things: tell you why and how the agreements were made between the U.S., Japan, and Okinawa, and then second, why they've never been implemented, which is more important than actually reaching an agreement. The two triggers of the reversion or the return of a base in Okinawa, as you know, were 1995, a rape incident, a schoolgirl rape incident in Okinawa, which resulted some months later in the decision by President Clinton to return a base, Futenma Marine Corps base, deemed dangerous in Okinawa, to the Japanese government. And the second trigger was in 2004, a crash of a helicopter that was based in Futenma into a university building that was right adjacent to the site. But let's start a little bit with discussing the actual place that's involved here. Can you? Oh, this is it. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. As you can see from this slide, I've got a bunch of others like that. The location of Okinawa is right in the middle of a very geopolitical, geostrategic location that makes, unfortunately, Okinawa one of the prime spots for American forces in Japan. About 74% of American forces are on that island. If indeed all of those, based on the strategic location of Futenma, here's another shot where you can see another sort of strategic location of the island. Even if the Japanese, even if the U.S. forces left overnight, I can guarantee you that there would be self-defense forces on Okinawa. Maybe not to the certain extremes that they are now, but certainly the location of that island makes it impossible to ignore. And here's a few others. This is actually taken from a site that calls the Senkaku of Yayutai. So the Chinese have also deemed it a strategically important island. This is from a Chinese site. So regardless how you look at it, Okinawa is not going to go away because of its location. It's not going to be what everybody would like it to be, a peaceful island in the middle of the Pacific. Its location makes it impossible. And as you can see from this slide, does this work? No, this doesn't work. Okay. As you can see from this slide, the concentration of okay, it does work. The concentration of U.S. Bases in Japan. If you go up to Misao, there's one. Tokyo has one. One here, but they're all down in Okinawa. This huge, long list of bases. Yokota's up here. Kamzama, Sakami Depot. These are clustered, but there are so many down there you can't even count them. Here's another shot of Okinawa. The location of Futenma is Ginowan City, number K, MCAS Futenma. This is where almost the southern part of Okinawa is where almost all of the bases are located. The idea was to transfer it to a lesser, very lightly populated area, which is here, F. Camp Schwab, located in Nago City. Another major marine base, Camp Hansen, is right over here, so the two of them would be together. These are training areas up north. This is the culprit. This is the famous Futenma airstrip. And as you can see from this air shot, the population density around that airfield is extremely high. Here's another shot of the same runway. Looking down, you can see that you have to go over buildings in order to get into the airfield. And a little bit of statistics about it. Futenma base is not where combat troops are located. It's a transport base. So it's the home of the MAG-36, Marine Aircraft Group 36. It's got the third largest runway in Okinawa after Kadena and Naha International. And there are about 70 aircraft there. 63 helicopters in 2010. 12 fixed-wing aircraft, mostly KC-130s. And then the helicopters in 2012 replaced by Ospreys. Ospreys are aircraft that can either take off and land as helicopters or take off and land as regular fixed-wing aircraft. And there are about 3,000 U.S. military personnel there. No combat troops. These troops are all there in order to either fly or service aircraft. This is the insignia of the MAG-36 combat support at Futenma. This is a map put out by the opposition, the base opposition groups, which shows not only how incredibly dense the area is around it, but there seem to be an incredible number of schools and hospitals right around the area that they wanted to highlight there. And this is what kids encounter every day when they're playing in the schoolyard. This is the shot in 2004 when the helicopter crashed into the university campus. Fortunately, nobody was injured on the civilian side, and the two pilots, I believe, the two Marines were slightly injured. And this is the usual situation outside the base or in Okinawa. This is typical. This is the other culprit, where the Futenma relocation is supposed to be, Camp Schwab, and this is the tip of Camp Schwab called Henoko. And these shots are just imposing what the eventual runway is supposed to look like. This is the latest version, a V-shaped dual runway right on the tip of Camp Schwab, extending into the ocean on both sides. This picture actually goes back to the 1960s. It looks like at this time the Marine Corps was also thinking about putting in a runway there. It never happened. These here show sort of what I call a constant in this whole saga. There has never been opinion in Okinawa, popular opinion, in any poll or referendum that has approved any kind of relocation of the Futenma airport to another part of Okinawa. In every opinion poll, the respondents have said no. This is the latest one, for example, that I could find. Asahi poll in about the time when Prime Minister Hatoyama reached the third of the agreements. 70% of the Okinawa residents were opposed to the decision to move the helicopter function to another site and training to Tokunoshima and Kagoshima. And 43% of Okinawans wanted the bases to be all removed from the prefecture. Another factor that has impacted very strongly on the whole issue is the base economy. I had to do a lot of research to find these figures. It's not easily located, but about 5% is my understanding of the Okinawan economy depends on the bases, either directly or indirectly. But if you talk about a community that hosts a base, a U.S. base, then that percentage is much higher. So here are the various ways money comes in. Host nation support, the so-called sympathy budget, includes the salaries of 9,000 Japanese employed at U.S. bases in Okinawa. That comes to about 645 million. But there are many, many other jobs that are linked indirectly to U.S. bases, contractors, vendors, etc. The one thing that's different about Okinawan bases is the Japanese government doesn't own them. They're owned privately. Futenma itself, for example, it's not here, but has 3,000 landowners. And they get, I think it's something like $65 million in rent. The rents of these bases have gone up over the years. It's almost like stock. In fact, there is a information that I got that some of them are traded like stock because they know every year when, or every 20 years, when the leases are renegotiated, that the rents will go up. So if you can get a hold of a landowner's stock, buy it, then you can make some money and guaranteed a local income. And then there's a complex system of subsidies coming from the central government to communities hosting U.S. bases. This is very ironic. Since 1997, Nago City, where Camp Schwab is, has received $145 million for accepting the location of Henoko, of Futenma to Henoko, but has never agreed to, at least not recently, to actually do so. Now we reach the tangled web of all these agreements that have been made over the years. There's basically been three major government-to-government agreements. The first one was in 1996, and we'll get into that in a second. The second one was in 2006 because the first one didn't work. And then we have the 2010 agreement because the second one was basically rendered invalid. So I've written already 2 books on this issue. I did the first book on the first 2 negotiations. I did the second book on the third negotiation. That book will be coming out in a week or so on the SICE website. And I hope I never have to do a third, but it is possible. So we've had three negotiations, three sets of agreements, and none of them implemented. This is where it stands right now. All of the bases south of Camp Foster, actually it's south of Kadena, but Camp Foster is close enough, and certain areas of Camp Foster to be returned to Japan. That's where it stands. So the whole part that you saw on the map below Kadena, that would be swept clean. The forces would be consolidated to other bases, and that 8,000 Marines would be shipped off to Guam by 2014, which is becoming a very elusive date. And the Japanese would pay for the relocation, 2/3, approximately $6 billion. That number 2 is likely to be much higher if and when they actually go. And then this would leave about 10,000 Marines in Okinawa, scattered throughout the island. But the problem with the agreement, the second agreement, we'll get into the first and the second, is that this is the kicker. Unless Futenma is relocated, none of this works. It's like a Chinese puzzle where you have to move every little bit and piece in order to get one thing done. Unless Futenma moves, nothing happens. And the longer nothing happens, the more likelihood there is that nothing will happen. This is the basic relocation plan for Futenma. Futenma basically has 2 functions. One of them, which is the KC-130s, those are fixed-wing aircraft. They're supposed to be moved not to Henoko, but to Iwakuni. This goes back to 1996. So those big planes that you saw taking off and landing in those slides will be gone. That's a given. So we're talking then about 60 helicopters, that we've been fighting over about 60 helicopters, where to move them for the last 15, 16 years. Now, once the Ospreys come in, the plan is in 2012, those helicopters will be phased out, and the Ospreys will come in. There will be about 24 of them altogether when all the helicopters are gone. And then the replacement facility, again, is supposed to be a dual runway, 1,600 meters long with a 100-meter overrun. And then if you need long runway operations, you can do it in some other area. However, you can read this if you will, but my point with this, going back to the Seiko plan, in 1995, when the Okinawa rape incident occurred, desire of the U.S. side then was to return Futenma not because of a strategic reason, but because of a humanitarian reason, in order to compensate or make up for the burden, the security burden of Japan, of Okinawa. The decision was made to return it and relocate its functions somewheres in Okinawa, and then, as I mentioned earlier, the big planes go to Iwakuni. It was a very simple plan, and they considered 3 options. One of them was to integrate the heliport into Kadena Air Base. That didn't fly. The Kadena option comes up again and again and again, and it's still floating around, but didn't fly in 1996, and it's still not viable, at least at the present state, in 2011. The second option was to construct a simple heliport at Camp Schwab, just to put it in and put the helicopters there and let it be done. And then the third option was to develop and construct a sea-based facility. The understanding of this would be a floating runway, or perhaps a runway on stilts, or perhaps a land reclaimed runway, but it would be a runway in the sea. And they decided to do this. Big mistake. The Seiko agreement also promised not just Futenma, but a lot of other returns of U.S. facilities. In fact, 21% of U.S. facilities were supposed to be returned to Japan as a result of a 1996 agreement. If you take a look at it, yes, some of it was returned, these 4 facilities. These were not. It wasn't just Futenma. The northern training area is still there. The Gimbaru training area is still there. Naha Port is still there. Camp Kauai is still open. So these were actually incorporated again into the 2006 agreement, because the Seiko agreement also had them, but they weren't implemented. We've forgotten about that part of the agreement. I won't go into all the details of this, except to say the main actors in the initial negotiations, 96 and 97, were a formidable group on both sides, and there was a lot of activity going on between or among the cabinet, the party, the LDP, and then emissaries like Yukio Okamoto, who went to Okinawa to do nemawashi, to sort of do the grassroots negotiating. He went there about 53 times. And then on the U.S. side, one of the key persons was Kurt Campbell, who is still around as the Assistant Secretary of State right now. So it was a very deliberate process. And the main proposals in 96, basically the Japanese wanted a Kadena option, and they said it was feasible. It was dropped because the USFJ didn't want it, and local communities were dead set against having Futenma's functions moved into Kadena. And the American side wanted the floating heliport that I mentioned, the sea-based facility. And then they had a big fight over the construction and location. Ultimately, the land reclamation was opted for in order to give Okinawa construction companies a lot of contracts. In 2005, we're back to square one. And this time, again, a lot of behind-the-scenes negotiations involving Okinawa as well. And Mr. Moriya wanted to actually build a base or a runway on Camp Schwab itself. DFAA, Defense Facilities Agency, wanted an offshore plan, the original one. And JDA, a third party, was fighting for a Kadena plan. So even the Japanese government was split over what plan they wanted. And the American side, again, had its own plan, including a shoals plan in shallow water. So the negotiations took an enormous amount of time because of this kind of infighting among all of the participants. I won't go into most of the nitty-gritty of this thing here. Except to say, it was all supposed to be done by 2014. A V-shaped runway was supposed to be in operation by 2014. The original plan in 1996 had 5 or 7 years for reversion of Futenma. That didn't happen. Now we have another target which is coming up very fast that also will not happen. Incidentally, originally, the idea of having an actual runway of 1,600 meters as the replacement facility, to me, didn't make much sense. I said, what do helicopters need with another runway? And because all of the big, heavy lifting aircraft would be in the Wakuni or someplace. Now it makes sense because we have Ospreys coming in and they need perhaps that much left. But at this time, it would have been logical to go back to the 500-meter heliport somewhere on another base. Another aspect of it that's not well understood is that this was part of the 2006 so-called roadmap agreement, would make Camp Hansen and Kadena joint use with the Ground Self-Defense Force and the Air Self-Defense Force. I think most people don't know that that was actually going to happen. Again, this has been sort of stalled because of the lack of progress. And of course, the 6 facilities listed here, at least 3 or 4 are from the SACO agreement. I'm going to skip a lot of this stuff. You can read it in the book. Here's a good cartoon of Mr. Hatoyama coming in to try to do it all by himself. When the Hatoyama came in into power, there were a couple of problems that occurred which rendered the Futenma relocation project doomed right from the start. The first was campaign promises to move Futenma anywheres but Okinawa, out of the province, out of the prefecture, or even out of the country. And it took 10 months of frantic negotiations, running around trying to find places to put the facility, and he finally gave up, and in May 2010 went back to the original agreement basically and accepted it again. So if you want to look at the decision-making process of the Hatoyama administration from 2009 to 2010, it's really top-heavy. You don't see any kind of structure in the negotiations that occurred in the first 2. There was no nemawashi. There was no, in fact, Okinawa wasn't even a part of the deal. And then because of the Hatoyama administration's focus on political decision-making, there were really no bureaucrats involved anymore. So we have the spectacle of high-level leaders like Mr. Hirano, Defense Minister Kitazawa, others, were running around trying to find places, begging people to take it, and nobody wanted the Futenma facility anywhere in Japan, except maybe Hokkaido, I think, was willing to take it. And then very late in the game, Hatoyama brought in Yukio Okamoto and said, you know, eat your spinach, do it. And he finally made the decision that to agree to accept the original decision, basically, which doomed him. And these are great slides. When Hatoyama comes in, Governor Nakayama is bowing because he believes the promise that Okinawa will see the end of Futenma. And in fact, the Okinawa vision of the DPJ that came out in 2008, right in the Okinawa vision, there is this promise of moving not only Futenma, but all Marine bases out of Okinawa. So Hatoyama came in basically with a campaign promise that he tried to fulfill. After the negotiation, after May 2010, Khan meets Nakayama. He doesn't bow. Mr. Noda meets him. Mr. Nakayama looks like he's going to punch him. Okinawa says no. It's not going to work. So the Hatoyama decision has been roundly rejected. The lack of trust between the two, the lack of sort of betrayal. We promised that we were going to get rid of the base and move it away, and you didn't. And ever since then, there's absolutely been no conceivable way for the public, the population, to accept it. Rallies, don't fly over our city, Hilo's out now. And then Hatoyama, interestingly, makes a statement that his reason for accepting the Futenma relocation project at Henoko was not because of what he originally told, deterrence. It was because he needed some kind of an answer, so he just made it up. It wasn't deterrence, and he admitted in an interview that it was hoben, a kind of excuse, a kind of made-up story, an expedient. At the time, Okamoto said, "What are you talking about?" I explained to the Prime Minister the concept of deterrence and made efforts to have him understand it. So Yuki Okamoto, who was giving him advice at the end, said that Hatoyama fully understood the meaning of deterrence when he was supposed to know about it. At any rate, the conclusions that I came from on these negotiations, in order to break an impasse on a negotiation, you need leadership on both sides and a combination of other factors. Intense effort by negotiators matched by persuasive efforts of intermediaries sent to Okinawa. The first two negotiations, this is for, it's cut off, but these are for the first two negotiations. So it was kind of brinksmanship, but once you reach an agreement, it was almost impossible to implement it. Decision-making process were similar, some differences in the role of the LDP, but basically that kind of decision-making process. And the opinion in Okinawa, as I mentioned earlier, was a constant, always very negative. The Okinawa government always played a key role. With the first agreement, it was basically Governor Ota who pulled the strings on it and eventually gave his approval. In the second negotiation, it was Governor Inamine who allowed it to be, and then in the third agreement, Mr. Nakaima, but he has not agreed to it at all. Now, what I'd like to say about these negotiations and the agreement that followed, the success of the first two in actually reaching an agreement was because it was a political deal. The negotiated agreement between the government and government, between the US and Japan, to actually relocate was fine. That was something which was sealed and everybody understood it. But the actual relocation plan was a deal that was made with Okinawa. The first two eventually reached that deal, and it was actually implementable when environmentalists showed up and stopped it cold. They were about ready to start the sea-based facility. The environmentalists showed up. They started to protest, and nobody then had the leadership or the guts to actually challenge them, and just languished until 2004. The second, again, involved a political deal with Okinawa as part of it. They may not have liked it, but they accepted it. And again, the political deal fell apart when Hatoyama pulled the rug out from under it. The third agreement is no political deal. It's just a US-Japan government-to-government agreement. Okinawa is not involved. In fact, the DPJ has been counterproductive. In the negotiation until 2010, Okinawa had no part of it. They were just sort of watching the planes fly by. And then when Mr. Khan came into power, he tried to reverse the trend and use a carrot and stick operation where you provide subsidies, money to local politicians in order to get them to agree to a deal. I think I have a slide on that. No, I don't have it here. But what Governor Nakayama said when the government tried to use the stick, well, if you don't accept it, we will cut off funding, et cetera, et cetera. He said, we are neither, what did he say? We are neither, well, basically, we will not accept this agreement because we no longer want to be either beaten with a stick or fed carrots. And as a result of that, a kind of Pandora's box was opened where there is no way for the governor, at least on the face of it, when high-level visitors come down to Okinawa, to accept any kind of agreement. I understand that Mr. Noda, Prime Minister Noda, is probably not going to be able to go down to Okinawa until about December of this year because there's such an intensely negative attitude down there. Now, how do you resolve a problem that seems unresolvable? Well, one way I think of looking at it is to think about Okinawa. What does Okinawa really want? And what can the government provide without forcing it to accept an agreement? There are two things, I think, that we can focus on. If we want to ever implement any kind of an arrangement that would remove Futenma, close it today, we have to focus not on the relocation site of Henoko, but on the overwhelming and high priority of closing Futenma. How do you close Futenma? Well, it's in all the plans. You move the large aircraft to Iwakuni, and you take the helicopters, which aren't going to be here in a couple of years, and move them somewhere else. The second runway that always has been desired, well, you can put that off into the future. Let's do it this way. As the ospreys come in, okay, instead of putting them into an imaginary runway which may never exist, you put them someplace else, not at Futenma. You can put them on Kadena and then shift some F-15s up to Misawa or someplace like that. You're only talking about 24 aircraft altogether. And the helicopters gradually go back. And as they vacate the Futenma, the facility is closed based on the existing plans. You move some of the facilities to Kadena, the rest to Iwakuni, and then the rest of this roadmap of moving 8,000 Marines, closing all the other facilities, get automatically kicked in. That's the first half of it. The second half of I think the formula to resolve this issue, which the Okinawan people would really like, is economic development. Not pork barrel, not another silly thing that nobody can use, but an actual plan, a comprehensive plan, an economic development plan that Okinawa, perhaps with outside help, government or others, create this economic development plan for the area south of Kadena that includes all of those reverted lands. Every single bit of property has to be used in this plan. And the government promises to provide financing for this kind of plan. The U.S. could even get involved with some kind of investment promotion or even technical assistance, whatever. So you put the onus on Okinawa. If you want to see all these bases disappear, you show us the plan and we'll start working on it. And then on the other hand, we're closing the base that's causing everybody so much grief. The end of the process is, within a very short while, the base is closed. And if the Henoko project is ever resolved and built, sure, it's there. But in the meantime, there isn't any base. And without the base there, the flashpoint of anti-base activism or any kind of political cause is lost. people will have to focus more on the real logical issue, the economic future of Okinawa. To me, that's a simple way of resolving an issue without having to wait for 10 years, another 20 years for somebody to finally agree to another political deal. So the era of political deals among the three are over. The responsibility now, it rests on all parties to find a logical solution, to close the base and then provide for the real economic future of Okinawa. And if it's not done, we're in trouble, because the political deal always meant there was a consensus among all three parties, the US, Japan, and Okinawa. The Okinawa consensus broke down. The Japanese government still holds the consensus and wants to go ahead with the current plan. But the Americans' consensus is breaking down. We have two senators that want to see a solution that's quite radical. It probably wouldn't work. And we have others, well, even Nakayama says it's a starting point. Then we have another one who says that we should move all of the Marines back to California. You know, if we can't find a place for them, we'll send them all to California. Believe me, if the Marines are back in California, they're not going anywhere. They're going to stay in California. They'll be allocated somewhere else. So the point is that a practical, logical, immediate solution, not a pie-in-the-sky solution, is to me the only way to resolve this. And you can take the existing agreement and let it run. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But the immediate goals can be reached fairly quickly. Robert, am I running out of time?
Almost.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably it for today.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you. As I promised Bill, this would be not only a lecture but a discussion session. As you see, the audience has increased while you were speaking. So clearly they've heard about the lecture and they came from all over Tokyo. So I said you would moderate. So the Q&A session is open. Speak up or hold your peace forever.
Just Bill, just a technical question.
If you can introduce yourself, if you want to, you don't have to.
Rod Armstrong, retired guy.
Good to see you, Ryan. Good to see you.
Just a technical question about these Ospreys. You said they can take off and land
Vertically.
as aircraft.
They have dual capability.
But the propeller blades are, if they're in the horizontal position, I'm sorry, the vertical position for them to act as airplanes, then the blades are longer than the bottom of the aircraft.
You want me to tell you how they work? I don't know how they work.
I'm going to show a picture of
I've seen pictures on the net, and they always take off and land in helicopter mode.
Yes, that's true.
So
but the requirement of them, according to what I was told by Marines, is that they have to have a runway capability, not just a heliport capability. So
why?
Probably because what would happen if they can't, work the way they're supposed to? I don't know, but it's a requirement that they have to.
We have a very diverse audience. I'm just wondering within the room is someone who's a pilot, a technical expert. This is on the record. So is there anybody here who wants?
Or maybe you could Google for me.
Well, we have information, but I just wonder. I mean, I know there are some people from the military or.
Yeah. All I know is that the Marines have set a 1,600 or so meter requirement in order to keep those aircraft in an air. Yes.
I have no idea what the truth is, but I've heard that in fixed wing style, they have, in fixed wing setting, they're much faster, and therefore they can reach destinations that they couldn't reach if they were only helicopter style.
And they probably have a much longer range, I would say.
Yeah, yeah.
Too, yeah. So that's probably the advantage.
That's what I've heard.
So if they're off to do some mission, then they can take off from Kadena as a regular aircraft and land on some little island as a helicopter. That's probably the logic.
They can't take off with the propellers in airplane style because the propeller's length is greater than the distance between.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's greater.
This is a landing of the no.
Yeah, it lands as a helicopter. That's the only way it can as a helicopter.
Then it doesn't operate then as an aircraft.
It can. It changes to aircraft mode in the air.
Oh, I see.
In the air.
I see. So it cannot take off and land as a regular one.
As a aircraft. No. Those propellers are longer than the distance between the bottom of the fuselage and.
Well, if that's true, then my original suggestion of having a 500-meter heliport on Camp Schwab is still viable. So I'll go back to my original solution. Okay. Yes, Mr. Meguro.
Yeah, Hiroshi Meguro from the University of Forest Studies. And yeah, I think I heard that if the Ospreys carry something heavy, they have to they need a longer runway.
Longer runway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if they're very light, they don't carry. If they don't carry anything, it doesn't need.
In any case, we don't know. Nobody in this room knows why. Is that?
I was just told by the Marines that they take off and land like regular planes. That's all I heard. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Change the question, Mr. Koyama.
According to your plan that you explained at the end of your speech, where will the Osprey go?
Oh, okay. I was sort of casual about that. As they arrive, my idea was that, if there are only 24 of them altogether, why not put them on Kadena? And this would be a temporary thing because originally there is another plan. So to close Futenma, you do things in a temporary mode with the original plan still in process. But you can close the airport, the airfield. That's the reason for that transition. If they ever leave Kadena, that's another story. Yes, please.
I have a piece of information on that. It's secondhand, but it's given to me from Jun Okumura. I was given this piece of information by a former U.S. military officer who is very closely tied. In fact, he is part of the U.S. defense industry now, and he follows and he covers Japan, so he knows. He's very intimately involved with the Ministry of Defense and the forces and the U.S. forces here. Now, what he told me was that. Do you remember when they were repaired? When the U.S. U.S. military decided to repair the runway at Futenma, yes, because the helicopter weren't going anywhere anytime soon. And while they were repairing that, they had to move the helicopters somewhere.
Right.
And those helicopters, according to this former official, the helicopters were moved to Kadena.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so it's let's talk about the two forces not being able. The technical explanation for the division is actually a false argument.
The ASDF did a study for the second negotiation that said it was technically feasible for the helicopter unit to be transferred to Kadena. That's why they had all this fight about it. The U.S. Responded saying that in a contingency, the number of helicopters and the number of F-15s at Kadena would be increased 2 or 3 fold. So it would be impossible for that one runway, even though it's a dual runway, to handle the load. That was one factor. The second factor, well, this is whether it's true or not, I don't know, is that the Air Force didn't want the Marines there, but that's something which I can't comment on. The third factor was that in all the cases where there was a plan being vetted about putting Futenma facilities into Kadena, the locals were dead set against it. So the chances are that even if Futenma were closed and Kadena became the second Futenma, it would become the new flashpoint, just like Futenma.
As you said, if you move some of the other aircraft out of Kadena,
yes,
and then the total load would.
And then you tell that this is a temporary thing.
They won't believe that.
Well, no, they won't believe it, but it would be put in the context of closing the damn base. Where are we going to put them? We're going to need a parking lot. So in that case, transferring F-15s out and putting Ospreys there. Of course, there's a view in Okinawa that Ospreys are dangerous. That's another story. But at least in terms of closing the base, this is my only desire, is to close this base so I don't have to write a third book. If you want to close the base, you've got to move the pieces around. And you could move them all out pretty quick. If you build on Camp Hansen or even on Camp Schwab, if you build a 500-meter heliport, you could put the choppers there pretty quick. And then the Ospreys, if indeed they operate almost the same as helicopters, they could certainly be, at least some of them could be there. Whether all 24 of them could be there, I don't know. Yes, please. Yes.
Just as a businessman, my new question was just confirming my understanding that is Mr. Okamoto the only and the real advisor to Mr. Hatoyama, because when the topic is hot, I see every day different people appearing on TV and saying I'm the official advisor and believing in blah blah blah. Jitsuro Terashima is one of them. And,
yes, Jitsuro Terashima and Magosaki. There were a string of unofficial advisors for Prime Minister Hatoyama that came in from time to time, and you can see some of that reflected in his comments. But in the end of the process, only when everything failed, they had tried for months and months and months and nothing was happening, they brought in Mr. Okamoto. And basically he gave good advice, but it was too late. Yes, please.
I'm Taka Mizuno, alumni of site. I like your word, temporary, because temporary, I think because of the stupid war in Afghanistan, all the Marines are gone from Futenma for the moment. And but now I think Obama administration is committed to new deployment of the Marine to Australia, Darwin.
Okay.
So I would like to know about what would the implication of this Futenma plan, and also U.S. Congress is now failed to agree for the budget cut, so that would be a deep defense budget cut. What might be slash all these arguments? So how would you see the shift of this kind of argument after this kind of a budget debate?
Okay, the first question is actually when I ask myself, what is the implication of Marines training in Australia and Darwin have for Futenma? First, it obviously has sort of geostrategical importance for all of Asia, including South China Sea. But I was told that those Marines would be globally sourced, so they're not directly linked to the Futenma. There might be some Marines that were supposed to come back to, they wouldn't be connected with Futenma, they would be connected with Okinawa. Some combat troops that might have been sent back from Iraq or Afghanistan, will be sent to there, but it's not directly linked at all to the Okinawa Marines.
But the Okinawa Marines have been trained in Australia for more than 10 years, I believe. Third
Since 2003, it was something, but this is a formal operation which is significant. I don't know of any.
That's why I'm saying temporary.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that some of those troops may come out of Okinawa because it's going to be globally sourced.
Right.
But
It's not linked directly.
like, okay, so that's 5,500 more to go. It's
No,
not
no,
linked.
no. But the result, of course, is that instead of, you know, the drawdown was significant during those wars. So instead of them all coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan to build up to, let's say, 20,000 or a little bit less as before, it'll stay much lower than that. In other words, if the Australian option wasn't there, there would be more troops coming back to Okinawa from the Middle East. That's what I'm saying. So it's people that didn't come would not come. It would be people that were probably would have come eventually back and build up the numbers. In that case, there is a direct result, but it's not because it was planned. It's just because of the global sourcing that many of those will go somewhere else. It's not linked to Okinawa.
And presumably some of them, and of course much of the remaining, if there's a large number of troops that are not coming back, then presumably a large part of that would be sourced from elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's
part of, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of this has to do with you know, thinking that has nothing to do with a particular issue. In fact, the whole question of Futenma is an anomaly. I mean, it really is not strategic. It was supposed to be returned for humanitarian reasons and got wrapped up into all this strategic realignment stuff when it wasn't even supposed to be there. And now it's stuck in the middle of this thing. So my suggestion is you pull it out and get rid of it.
But would you say that now we're even hearing talk about the Philippines?
No, the Philippines under the Constitution cannot take any foreign forces.
Oh.
It's not going to happen.
How about budget?
Pardon?
Budget cut implication?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't ask this. Yeah, okay. The second one, yeah, this is a real problem, and that's why we need quick resolution. If we just let things going, oh, you know, eventually we'll get the Okinawans to agree. Elizabeth, what I said in my final comments was that the U.S. is unraveling. The U.S. is unraveling. So it could very well be that we'll see, because the Japanese haven't delivered with the actual relocation implementation, that the Congress will actually pull the rug out. And of course, the numbers are going up. It's going to cost a lot more than $4 billion to relocate to Guam. There's another issue is, you know, maybe the Marines don't want to go to Guam now, and that could also be a Pentagon issue.
Doesn't that last part of this story sort of sound a lot like your temporary proposal? You know, this. No. This is actually not my proposal. I know it is. I know it isn't.
Yeah.
But there are similarities.
Yeah, there are similarities, but this, number one, this is supposed to be the end of the process, and mine is a temporary expedient. And in this one too, they've forgotten that it's only the helicopter unit that we're talking about, and not the rest of the facilities. So they're thinking of all of Futenma going into Kadena, all 3,000 troops. See, moving Marine Corps assets means everybody. That's not going to work. It's not going to work. You can't move the entire, 12 KC-130s and 3,000 troops and all of the logistical stuff and pile them into the golf course of Kadena. Yes, Robert?
Someone mentioned the Philippines. You noted that the Philippine constitution does not allow for foreign basing. Now, all of us are familiar with Japan and Article 9 know that the constitution can be flexible. Philippines clearly, at least the Philippines government, considers it has a big problem with China now.
Right.
Foreign forces can be described as just being in transit. Sometimes you're in transit, you miss your plane, and you just stay a little longer. So, isn't it actually feasible to think that at one point the Philippines would want
Marines.
Oh, absolutely.
In the country and would like find a way to deal with constitutional problem.
Absolutely, but again, this is a kind of pie in the sky thing. I mean, if we're waiting for the Philippine government to change its constitution so that a few Marines can go, then we're going to wait a long time. But it's feasible, yeah.
I would say not to alter the constitution, just to reinterpret it and just have them basically be there. I mean, as they are. I mean, there are American forces from time to time that
training
are in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So you can just say, well, they're not very. They just take a long time to train.
Yeah, but Marines, I mean, they can camp out there for a while, but they really need a facility with a lot of logistical support. And one of the things which, is sort of overlooked is that the Marines in Okinawa have to train together. I mean, they have to have the combat troops training with the support troops, the transport troops. You just can't scatter them all over the place, put a few in the Philippines, a few in Australia, and then expect them to respond suddenly to a contingency. It just not work. It doesn't work. As a result, and the Marines in Okinawa have another function of working with the 7th Fleet. They can be reconfigured to be part of the 7th Fleet in a contingency. So they really have to be pretty close to both the Navy as well as to their training grounds. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Ryan Yokota. I'm from the University of Chicago. Just before we move on, if you think that popular dissent and opposition to military bases is strong in Okinawa, then probably it's a good idea to start looking at the activism that helped to bring about that change in the Constitution in the Philippines, because I think that they've gotten quite used to not having military troops, and it would be very difficult, I think, to shift public opinion in the Philippines around this issue. But my question, I think, goes to another aspect. In general, I really liked your proposal. I'm sure it would be really great to see. I guess my question is, who are the main players? Because it seems like this is a decision that basically is actionable within United States policy. It doesn't necessarily have to deal with Japanese government acquiescence. It doesn't necessarily have to bring in a whole lot of Okinawan popular opinion. It seems to me that a lot of what you're suggesting is something that's actionable primarily by the United States government and its armed forces. So I guess my question to you is, who are the main people, forces, players within either the United States Department of State or within the armed forces structures? Who are the main forces that are who would oppose this kind of unilateral drawdown of Futenma functions and realignment of Futenma functions? Because I guess, it seems to me, from my analysis, it seems that there's no impetus for the United States to unilaterally do this because the United States is in such a beneficial position. The status quo for them is great. They get this incredible sympathy budget from the Japanese national government. They don't have to realign their forces at any time right now. They can continue to exist as it has been for a very long time. So I guess, my question is, what kind of political will would be able to force through this kind of unilateral drawdown, and who would be the main obstacles?
Well, you actually answered part of the question, political will, and that's why the first and second agreements occurred. It was political leadership, even at the presidential level, that led to certain decisions. Even in the second decision, Secretary Rumsfeld flew over Futenma in 2003 and said, "This is awful. Why isn't this place closed?" So he requested that it be speeded up. And almost in the first two negotiations, at the critical time, in both cases, high-level leadership kicked in many cases, to force the military to do something it didn't want. I mean, nobody wants to move when it's comfortable. Futenma could stay open forever, and people would, the military would be happy. But it's not a viable option if indeed the very presence of Okinawa, of Futenma open in Okinawa, creates this kind of extreme anti-base movement and emotions. It'll reach a critical mass at some point. Let's say, for example, God help us, if there's another aircraft crashing into a schoolhouse or a hospital around it. So we can't wait for that accident to happen. So the political leadership has to come from the top. It's not going to come from those with vested interests. As far as the DPJ government is concerned, they are slowly beginning to operate as the LDP did in the past, which means that they understand pragmatic, realistic solutions, and they would be perfectly happy to make a political deal again with the Okinawans. But in this case, the political deal would give the Okinawans the advantage. They would get a plan that they created, and the funding for that plan, and those bases would be gone. I mean, it's a win-win situation. Somebody has to give. We should give. The central government of Japan should give, and Okinawa, we should reap the benefits of having to deal with this issue for such a long time. Does that answer your question? Yeah. As best I can do. Yes, please, in the back.
My name is Yukio Kashiyama, Japanese newspaper Sankei. As you know, recently the Japanese government started the procedure of so-called environmental impact assessment in order to prepare to reclaim the coast of the Henoko.
Yes.
But for me, it seems very strange because basically the central government and local government of Okinawa Prefecture have not reached any agreement on the relocation of the Futenma Air bases. Under these kind of circumstances, I don't understand why the Japanese government started this kind of procedure. It would be in vain because they don't have any agreement. So I'm sure, apparently, it would not be finished, it would not be implemented, completed. So.
Okay. I understand.
Yes. So my question is whether U.S. government actually trusts the Japanese government. The other day, Leon Panetta, the defense secretary, came to Japan and met with the Japanese defense minister in Chicago, and Leon Panetta welcomed this Japanese government decision. So it's a nonsense, I think.
Well, let me put it this way. Again, as I said earlier, there are two aspects of this that we have to consider. One is the government-to-government agreement between the U.S. and Japan, and the environmental impact assessment, which will be ready to provide to the governor to sign, is part of that process. The second aspect was the political deal that was made in the past that included the governor as the main person, the governor of Okinawa. With the second agreement, the environmental papers were sent to Governor Nakayama, and he sat on them for years. So it could very well be that even if he doesn't sign them, he'll just sit on them like he did before. So unless the political deal is made, and eventually he agreed to them, remember? In 2009, finally the environmental assessment, the second one, was finished. The governor sort of agreed to go along with it, and then the DPJ came in, and it broke the government-to-government agreement, and broke the whole deal. The whole political deal fell apart in 2009, and there's nothing to pick up. So for the environmental assessment to be ignored, it probably would be silly, and because then if you made a political deal, and you had no environmental assessment, you had to start from scratch, take another couple of years, and who knows what would happen. So it's kind of an unnecessary evil to have that thing around, but it is absolutely essential. And then if the governor, and there is another way to resolve the problem, but it probably won't be done. If the governor says, no, I'm not going to sign it, the government could override it, but it would require a diet action. That was done by Hashimoto in the case of the land leases that were refused in the mid-90s. The landowner said, we're not going to sign those leases. And it looked like all the Marines and everybody would have to leave certain bases. The government went and passed a special measures law that allowed the government basically, to override the governor. That's not going to happen this time. They've already said they wouldn't do so. So the procedures of the government-to-government agreement are not necessarily relevant to the Okinawan political deal that's been made in the past. Yes, please.
My name is Sato, a small business owner and ordinary citizen of Tokyo. It seems to me that media in this country treating everybody so equally, that will give the confusion amongst the readers or private citizens or ordinary citizens of Japan. Because government, the national government and local government or village town mayor are treated equally. Their voices are the same power to influence on the government decision making. I think that is totally wrong. This is talking about the national defense policy. Now I, as an ordinary citizen, understand about the critical importance of the presence of Okinawa base. So I think the most Japanese citizens have been updated to overview the whole picture of the presence of Okinawa. And then from there, I think the discussion in the future will be much easier for taking the national interest or local interest. And besides that, we've been spending a lot to Okinawans. I think there has to be a limit of their demand. And I know the very mass crowds, anti-Okinawa based campaigners, are the landlords of Okinawa bases. So they have their own interest in being against or being for the Okinawa anything.
Right.
And I think we have reached the point that the national Japanese interest should make a decision at the next electoral decision-making time. And I think the time is maturing, and we don't want to screw up our own decision-making this time. I'm talking about the selection of LDP or DPJ. And I think the future will be a different scenario that we have to make. This is vital interest because of the surrounding areas. And the worst thing that I'm afraid as a citizen of Japan, don't leave us alone. I like Marine Corps staying in Okinawa. Helicopters, I don't care. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess that wasn't the question. Anybody else? Yes. Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Sadaki Numata, former ambassador in charge of Okinawan affairs, I went through the helicopter crash in 2004. On the basis of that experience, I begged to dissent from the previous opinion expressed. Because I was there for 2 years, and I sat through about 90 protest sessions from the Okinawan residents. I was accused of not acting in the interest of the Okinawan people, although I was ambassador in charge of Okinawan affairs. My point is that you do have to remember that on the part of the Okinawan people, they feel that their NIMBY syndrome is justified because of the history, dating back a few hundred years, dating back to the days of the Ryukyu Kingdom. And the Meiji Restoration, the Ryukyu Kingdom was abolished, and the people of Okinawa felt marginalized. So they had this antipathy towards the mainlanders, plus the antipathy towards the Americans. So they feel that their NIMBY syndrome is justified. They do not feel that the NIMBY syndrome on the part of the mainlanders is not justified. And unless you do something about it, I don't think there is a way out. And I'm afraid the opinion expressed by the previous speaker, trying to steamroll over these sentiments on the part of the Okinawan people, I don't think it's in the cards. I'm sorry to dissent.
Yes, and from the U.S. point of view, we really have tried to lower our presence there. I mean, if you take a look at all those facilities that I showed on the slide, we really put a lot of cards on the table, but nobody has picked it up. So it's never an agreement, it's always the implementation of the agreement.
My point is, Prime Minister Hatuyama made a very serious mistake when he said he would move the bases out of Okinawa without having any real prospect of actually moving them anywhere. And unless the Okinawan people feel that the people on the mainland genuinely empathize with them, and that sentiment is shown to them through the actions of the central government, preferably, I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Yes, the whole Hatayama experience was a decision-making process that had no structure. It was totally haphazard. The Okinawans weren't involved. The U.S. wasn't involved. The bureaucracy wasn't involved. The defense facilities people who really knew Okinawa were not involved. It was basically doomed to failure right from the start, and everybody knew that. So everybody just sort of waited for the thing to collapse. And then Prime Minister Khan, unfortunately, kicked the can down the road and did nothing really except make statements. But he was faced with an earthquake. You can consider that. But really, no progress made. With Prime Minister Noda, he's returned a little bit back to the LDP consensus making. But so far, he sent cabinet members, and they've gone through the motions. They've bowed, and he's maybe not bowed back. And then he also sent the Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary recently. But that's not going to work. All these public posturings with photo opportunities is not going to work. So the question earlier was, how do you resolve this? Obviously, you've got to get a lot of people involved and do a lot of heavy lifting. The nemowashi has to be extremely severe on both sides, and not just photo opportunities, but in-depth discussions. And if you follow a logical path that I've given, it's doable. It's doable because the onus would be on Okinawa to chart their future, and it wouldn't be on the government of Japan to figure out what they should do, or the U.S. to sit back and wait for the other two to fight it out. Everybody would be logically involved in it, and I think that's the point I'm trying to make. It's got to be a three-way decision right from the start. Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Charlie Reed from Stars and Stripes. What's stopping your temporary Kadena plan from moving forward? It seems like
it's my idea.
Well, but you come from an expert position, and the Okinawans might hate the idea of Futenma ops going to Kadena, but they hate Futenma more. So it seems like it would create a lot of potentially goodwill, a goodwill gesture towards, to the ultimate goal of getting Futenma out of this heavily populated area. So why? Well, why
frankly, I told this to representatives of the Okinawa prefectural government. I told this to people in the Ministry of Defense. I told this to several people in the U.S. government. But I'm just an individual. I mean, maybe tonight, somebody will put it in the newspaper or something like that. But it is just an idea out there. Why don't we just use our brains and figure out how to solve this problem? And if I can come up with an idea, other people can come up with even better ideas. But nobody's coming up with ideas as to how to form a bridge, if you will, a bridging mechanism to get from where we are now to the next stage of relocation.
Right, and that seems to be the bread and butter of what U.S. Forces Japan as a command is supposed to do. This sort of diplomatic-minded command that works with the Japanese. I mean, why hasn't anybody else suggested such things, or at least not talked about them publicly, save for the senators.
This should be your editorial for the Stars and Stripes. Yes, please.
Sam Jameson with the Yomiuri Research Institute. The one word we haven't mentioned tonight, and I presume that the full discussion would take the next 6 hours because nobody ever answers the question. Deterrence. What is what do 24 helicopters do, whether they're called Ospreys or helicopters? We've got 1.1 million North Koreans, 2.5 million Chinese. Where is the deterrence? What are they deterring against?
Well, I hope you're not suggesting we should beef them up to 200 or 300. Okinawa already has too many. I didn't bring it, but those, that unit, that helicopter unit, is part of a very large operation which includes the combat troops, which includes troops back in Guam, which includes troops back in Hawaii, troops back in California. So it's part of a very large operation. The Marines themselves in Okinawa, that small contingency, are not the deterrent. It's the U.S. forces Japan that's the deterrent. So if they're part of a team, if they have a role to play in a contingency, so be it. And if they have to be there, so be it. If they can be somewhere else, so be it. But they're part of a larger complex, what they call MAGTF. And because of that operation, if you took them out, you'd have to make up the ground troops from somewhere else. Logically, then, why doesn't the self-defense force have a ground troop that can do it? Well, their constitution wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't be able to leave Japan. So the Marines basically are the only force of ground troops in the Asia Pacific that can move very quickly in any direction, whether it's for contingency, a natural disaster, etc. If you move them somewhere else, they could get there eventually, but they're conveniently located in Okinawa.
You are the first person that has even referred to the LCF doing what it should be doing. I congratulate you on that point. And I've been listening to this argument for years, and you're the only one that's mentioned that.
Thank you.
Of course, to ask the Japanese to, in any way, change the nuance of their constitution, much less actually revise it, is too much.
Well, we have a mutual security, a mutual cooperation security treaty based on their constitution, and that's why the Marines are there.
Yes, but it's not a mutual cooperation agreement. It is the Americans acting on behalf of the Japanese.
Right.
There's no mutual cooperation in it.
Well, there is mutual cooperation, but it's not in the military. Well, in case of a contingency in the areas around Japan, there is cooperation, because then the U.S. forces would be the combat and the logistical support by Japanese law. The law in 2003 would provide all the logistical support and backup support for a contingency. So they would provide a non-combat role for forces that would be deployed to different parts of Asia. So that's pretty much been set by law. But beyond that, for example, I can't imagine that the ground self-defense force would rush to South Korea to help. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work.
We had an ambassador who spent 4 years here under George Bush asking the Japanese to change the definition of
collective self-defense.
What is that word?
Collective self-defense. CSD, yeah.
Collective self-defense.
Yeah,
and the answer was no.
Well, Abe said yes, but he was only lasted a year. You remember he had a blue ribbon panel that said yes, and then he was out, and then...
Fukuda also turned it down.
Well, Fukuda didn't like it, so he put the... Well, CSD is a work in progress. Yes, please.
My name is Michael Okel, and I'm just an undergraduate Asian Studies major here at TUJ, so my credentials aren't as shiny as everyone else in this room. But
They are. You're a student at TUJ. We exist to serve the students.
But to go with the thinking of Okinawans' defense, I know they're slightly biased, but any of the modern documentaries on Okinawans about the Okinawans not wanting the bases there say it's because Okinawa was raped during World War II. It was raped before World War II, and it was raped when its kingdom was absorbed by Japan. And like the Ainu, the Okinawans are a marginal Japanese race. While they are of Japanese blood, they're of slightly different Japanese blood, and they've never been included completely by the mainland. And then the horrors they faced during World War II and before has made them convinced, like in the documentaries, in interviews, Okinawans fighting to get the bases out say, we experienced war. We don't want our children to experience war. We don't want the bases. So I know the realpolitik says that we should have forces in Okinawa, and perhaps the biggest irony of Asia is that the island that most wants peace is in the most war potential area in the entire continent. But they don't want the bases here. And I know hegemonic theory says that if China rises, it will challenge the United States and Japan. But for it to invade Okinawa would be an act of World War III, which no one wants. And like was such as earlier, the troops aren't essential. They're help and they help the system. But the Marines in Okinawa don't keep China from invading Taiwan. It's the American Naval Task Force that keeps China from invading Taiwan. I'm sorry. I know strategically it's best to keep American forces in Okinawa, but like you yourself said, it's not like Japan's going to leave it defenseless. The self-defense force would move in. Shouldn't we do the right thing rather than the strategic thing and leave Okinawa and give Okinawa back to the Okinawans?
Well, that's quite idealistic, but again, if we moved out tomorrow, basically saying we don't need an alliance, what would Japan do? Think about the logic of that. Japan would have to increase its defense spending to maybe 3 or 4% of GDP. It would have to fill those bases up with SDF forces in Okinawa because that geostrategical location is the curse that's not going to go away. Since Japan is surrounded by 3 nuclear powers, Japan would have to consider having its own nuclear capability. It's a Pandora's box. The logic now is, for the time being, the alliance works. And for Okinawa, what we can do is try to make it better and better and better. Ultimately, I think the plans that I showed you about reducing the burden is just the first step. There will be different agreements in the future to even lower the presence some more. But no matter what, as long as Asia is in a situation where there are large powers with nuclear weapons, the U.S. forces are not going to easily go away.
That's. I think we've reached our time.
So, thank you very much, Bill.